Welcome! We're recording this video for Debbie O'Day of Oregon State University. Debbie is currently having some issues due to the wildfire activity in the state of Oregon. As soon as she can, she will re-record these slides with her own voice, but we wanted to get the FAFSA ORSAA training up and running as soon as we could. Debbie is a member of the Oregon Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators and has served in our executive committee for years. In this video, we'll talk about what makes a student independent versus dependent upon their parents, and we'll talk about how to determine who the student's financial aid parents are, if they are indeed a dependent student. There's a lot of text on this one side, but determining whether or not a student is independent or dependent can be somewhat complicated. The FAFSA and ORSAA provide a series of questions to determine if the student's considered independent versus dependent for financial aid purposes. The responses to the questions on this slide determine the student's dependency status, and in turn, if the student will be required to report parental information on the FAFSA or ORSAA. If a student answers no to all of these questions, the student is considered dependent and will need to provide parental information, even if they support themselves or the parent did not claim them on the tax return. The questions are, is the student 24 years of age or older? Is the student married? Is the student enrolled in a graduate program? Is the student providing at least 50% of the support for a child or other dependents? Is the student on active duty in the U.S. military? Is the student an other than dishonorably discharged veteran of the U.S. military? Was the student in foster care or orphaned at any time after their 13th birthday, even if they've been reunited with their family or adopted into a new family? Is the student an emancipated minor? Does the student have a legal guardian other than a parent or step-parent? Is the student self-supporting and homeless or at risk of being homeless? On the opposite side, if a student answers yes to just one of these things, the student is considered independent and does not need to provide parental information. The FAFSA will prompt the student to answer a few questions at a time. This is a FAFSA screenshot from the 2020-2021 FAFSA. On the FAFSA, if you see the word you or yours, this is referring to the student and not the parent, unless otherwise noted. The ORSAA will prompt the student to answer a few questions at a time. This is a screenshot from the 2020-2021 ORSAA. On the ORSAA, the student will need to answer each dependency question, even if they've answered yes to a question early in the series. All of the dependency questions display on the ORSAA. Please note that if you see the word you or yours, this is referring to the student and not the parent, unless otherwise noted. The student may be asked if they are homeless or at risk of being homeless. This is referring to Title X and the McKinney-Vento Act. Your school personnel or FAN advocate, if you live in Central Oregon, will be able to assist you if you think the student meets this criteria. The question mark to the right will also provide additional clarification. This is a FAFSA screenshot. If a student answers yes to this question, the next page will display follow-up or clarifying questions for the student. This is a screenshot of a homeless question on the ORSAA application. Notice that instead of an option to display help or instructions for a question, the instructions and help text are automatically displayed. When you're working with an ORSAA student, this can lead to longer completion times, as the student and family often want to take the time to read the instructions for each question, even when the question doesn't pertain to them. If a FAFSA student answers no to all of the questions provided, this screen will appear and clarify that parental information is needed. If they are unable to provide parental information at the time of completing the FAFSA, they will be allowed to continue with additional student questions by selecting the Unable option, but the application will be incomplete until the parental information is added. This means that financial aid offices won't be able to start processing the FAFSA application until it's completed. However, if the student has special circumstances such as it being harmful for them to be in contact with both of their parents, the students will want to select the Unable option and then contact the financial aid office of the school or schools they are interested in attending for assistance on how to proceed. The student will need to contact each individual school listed on their FAFSA to discuss the options at that institution. If a student answers yes to the questions, the student will be given the option to provide parental information. However, it is not required. Unlike the FAFSA, the ORSAA will not allow a dependent student to move forward without parent information. If the student does not have parent information at this point, they should save their ORSAA and log out. Students can log back in later to provide parent information. If the student has a special circumstance, such as it being harmful for them to be in contact with both of their parents, the student should contact the financial aid office of the school or schools they are interested in attending for assistance on how to proceed. The student will need to contact each individual school to discuss their options at that institution. For some, the financial aid parent may be tricky to determine. FAFSA and ORSAA have their own definition of a parent for financial aid purposes, which we will walk through in the next few slides. The FAFSA-ORSAA definition of parent is the only one that matters when completing the form. Even if the FAFSA-ORSAA parent does not make sense to a particular family, they need to use the appropriate financial aid parent or parents when completing their form. This graphic helps illustrate how you determine the parental information needed on the application. Remember, the financial aid rules for parent are very specific and may be different than what the student or parent is expecting. It's important to follow the financial aid rules when determining what parent information is reported on the FAFSA or ORSAA. First, are the student's biological or adoptive parents married to each other? If yes, they will report both parents' information on the application. Are the student's parents unmarried but living together? If yes, they will report both parents' information on the application. If the student's parents are not married to each other and don't live together, which parent did the student live with the most in the last 12 months? Usually, a student lives more with one parent than the other. Note that this question does not ask which parent had custody of the student, but rather which parent the student lived with the most in the last 12 months. This parent is the financial aid parent for the FAFSA and the ORSAA. If the student lived with both parents equally, then to break this tie, we ask which parent provided more financial support. Consider who may have provided health insurance, paid for car insurance, or perhaps footed the cell phone bill. Note that this question doesn't ask which parent claimed the student on their federal income tax returns. Instead, it asks which parent provided more financial support in the last 12 months. This parent is the financial aid parent for the FAFSA or ORSAA. The other parent's information is not reported on the FAFSA or ORSAA. Is the financial aid parent currently married? If so, the student will need to report the financial information for both the financial aid parent and the step-parent, regardless if the step-parent plans to assist with college expenses. In some cases, the person the student lives with, who may be functioning as their parent or in that parent role, may not be the financial aid parent. If the student is living with a grandparent or relative, they would not be considered the student's financial aid parent unless they legally adopted the student. If the student is living with someone who has not legally adopted them, you will need to refer to the information we covered on the previous slide to report the appropriate parent's information. You've completed another installment of the FAFSA ORSAA completion training. Hopefully when you come back to reference this video again, you'll get to hear from Debbie O'Day of Oregon State University. Please feel free to come back as often as you need. These videos will be up all year. And when you're ready, you can move forward to video number 5. Thank you for joining us.